So let's understand the structure of the webinar. So we will cover two aspects in this webinar. At first, we will discuss what students do, what students generally do when they have to retake the GMAT or when they are in the last 1 month of their prep. And we will then go about looking at what they should actually do. Okay, so there are three things which I see most of the students doing. It's a very common practice. The first and foremost thing that students do is they practice more questions, and then they practice even more questions, and when they exhaust that, they practice even more questions. The second thing, which is related to the first one, they take a lot of mocks. In fact, I have heard a lot of people saying that you should take a mock every 4 days or 5 days before you take the GMAT. Okay, and a lot of students just believe in revisiting concepts and then practicing questions. Okay, these are the three common things that I have seen most of the students doing when they score low. Okay, and there are a few problems with each of the above, and we'll understand what are the problems through this webinar. So I'll quickly run you through what is the problem with just practicing questions. I'm not against practicing questions, but I'm against the concept of just practicing questions and practicing more questions. Well, practicing questions is certainly going to help you, but it is not going to magically improve your score. There is something else that is supposed to be done along with practicing questions to make sure that your effort goes in the right direction and you're able to improve. Okay, and in order to help you understand what you need to do along with practicing questions, it is very, very important for us to understand how the GMAT algorithm really works. Okay, so I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes in helping you understand how the GMAT algorithm works, because once you understand how it works, you'll be able to understand what is the problem with just practicing questions and what are the changes that you need to bring about in your approach. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Now, what I'm going to do is, all of us know that it's an adaptive test. So if you actually do some questions right, the difficulty level of the test increases. So I'm going to run a simulation where I'm going to take a student, let's call him student 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show his journey through first 5 questions. Okay, and this is just a simulation. By no means I mean to communicate that this is the exact algorithm that GMAT uses, but this is just a simulation. Okay, so on the left hand side of the axis, I have marked the difficulty level of the questions. You can see them over here. Okay, they are marked over here on the left hand side. So a medium question is for 3 points, medium hard is for 4 points, and hard is for 5 points. So the first question that the student attempts, he gets that question right. Now, obviously, it's a GMAT adaptive algorithm, so the algorithm automatically increases the difficulty level of the question. So the next question that the student gets is a medium hard one. Okay, now the student gets this question right as well. Okay, so what is going to happen next? The student is going to get a even more harder question, more difficult question. Okay, now let's assume that the student also gets this question right. Now, obviously, he will still get more questions like this. So I'm assuming that this is the hardest level he has reached right now. So let's say the next question that gets is also a hard question. Now, let's assume that he gets it wrong. Then the difficulty level drops and he gets the next question wrong as well. So what happened over here? This student, in fact, before I tell you, can you tell me what is the score that this student got and what is his accuracy? Can you type that in the chat pod? What do you think is the accuracy of this student and what is the score? To calculate the score, you can use the points that are mentioned on the y-axis. Okay, I'll wait for your responses. You can type your responses in the chat pod. Okay, Ollie says it's 67 percentile. Okay, good. I am not sure how you calculated percentage, but I think you mean to communicate the percentage accuracy. Okay, I'll wait for a few more responses. Guys, this is simple maths. Just I want to see I just want to look at two things. I want to look at accuracy of the student and the score that he has got. Okay, I have one response. Milesh says it's 60%. Good, Milesh. So it is indeed 60%. The student has got 3 out of 5 questions right. So his accuracy is 60%. And we can see that his score is 12 points. He got a medium question, he got a medium hard question, and a hard question right. So total score 3 plus 4 plus 5 is 12 points. Okay. What now I'm going to do is I'm going to take another student as an example, okay, in the simulation. And I'm going to maintain the same accuracy level for the student. And let's see how it impacts the overall performance. So let's, obviously the student is also going to start with a medium question. Everyone starts with a medium question on the GMAT, okay? And let's assume that this student gets it wrong. Now what happens next? Obviously, the difficulty level of the next question is going to drop, and he gets an easy medium question. Now, somehow he gets this question wrong as well. Now what will happen next? His difficulty level will drop even further. He might as well get an easy question. Now, somehow he gets this question right. He's probably good at answering easy questions. He gets this one right, and then he gets an easy medium question. And he knows this one, he gets this right as well. The next question that he gets is again another medium question, and he gets it right too. Okay, so we can clearly see that the accuracy of this student is also 60%. He got 3 questions right out of 5. But what about his score? His score is a mere 6 points. Okay, his score is just 6 points compared to the score of the other student, which was 12 points, right? So there's a huge difference between the scores of the two students. The first student is actually ending up with twice the score. And that is the problem with the concept of accuracy. When we focus on accuracy, we are just talking about the number of questions that we are getting right. And I see this question from a lot of students that, in fact, let me ask how many of you also feel the same in a poll, that how many of you have come across a scenario or have felt that when you attempt the OG questions, your accuracy is 70 to 80%, which is pretty high, but on the mock test, you score pretty low. How many of you have gone through that scenario yourself? That while solving OG questions, your accuracy is 70 to 80%, or maybe 80 to 90% as well. But when you take a mock, your score, your accuracy, your final score reduces substantially. Okay, I'll wait for a few responses here. And I want all of you to respond to this because this is a very, very important question. And I want all of you to respond to this one, please. Okay, so I have got a good number of responses already. Let me enter poll now. So I see that every one of you who is attending the webinar thinks or has gone through this situation. And this is a very practical situation that I have seen a lot of people talking about. The only reason why we think there is a discrepancy is because we are focusing on the wrong metric. We are focusing on accuracy. In fact, it's also somewhere about the fact that OG does not have too many hard questions. So that's another thing. But when you look at accuracy, you're looking at a wrong metric. Okay, so I just showed you a simulation where I showed you a scenario where the test adapts after every question. GMAT isn't as harsh as shown. It does not adapt after every question, but it does so after a block of 3 to 4 questions or 2 to 3 questions. They don't reveal what is the exact number, but from our experience and analysis, we have found that it generally adapts after every 2 to 3 questions. So I'm now going to show you some real ESR snapshots to make you understand what you need to really do to get a high score on GMAT. So let me show you the ESR for the verbal section of one of the students that I interacted with. So this is the ESR, a snapshot of the ESR rather. You can see the score of the student was a 30, verbal 30. And what it shows is it divides the complete verbal section into 4 quarters. Okay, and each of these bar charts represents the accuracy in each of the quarters. So the blue bars are basically the accuracy numbers. So in the first quarter, the student got a 50% questions right. In second quarter, the student got 86% questions right. And in the third quarter, he got every question right. And in the last one, he got 62% questions right. Okay, so this is what this ESR tells us. So let's calculate what was the total number of mistakes that the student did. Okay, so if I go about calculating that, in the first quarter, he did 4 mistakes, because in the first quarter, in the verbal section, there are 8 questions. In the second quarter, there are 7. In the third one, there are 7. And in the last one, there are 8. Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you might be thinking, if I add 8 plus 7 plus 7 plus 8, it just adds up to 30. But we have 36 questions on the GMAT. What about the rest 6 of them? Can anyone tell me what about the rest 6 of them? Okay. Please respond to the poll in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and start sharing once again. So I'm asking you, I talked about 30 questions. I showed 30 questions in the ESR, but there are 36 questions on the GMAT. So what about the rest 6 questions? Why isn't it shown on the ESR? What is the reason for that? And I want everyone to respond to the chat. Okay, we'll wait for some responses. All right, so I see some responses. Shinkla says randomly skipped by GMAT. Not really, it is not randomly skipped, but you're close. Marco says these are experimental questions. Pratt, these are experimental questions. Good, I like the responses. Mahiti says it is not attempted. Not really, Mahiti, it is about, it's basically non-marked questions. So there are some experimental questions that GMAT gives for every, like to every student. So it is supposed to help them understand what is the difficulty level of the questions. So they need to constantly keep changing the questions, and that's why they do so. Okay, so these 6 questions are not marked, and that's why you don't see them in your ESRs. So a total of 30 questions are marked by the GMAT. All right, now I have started sharing my screen again, so you should be able to see the screen. So what I meant to say was, overall you have 8 questions in the first section, 7 in the second quarter, 7 in the third one, and 8 in the last one. Now, if you look at this, you will understand that this student got 50% of the first quarter wrong. That means he got 4 questions wrong in the first quarter. He got 1 question wrong in the second quarter. He got 3 questions wrong in the last quarter. So all in all, this student made only 8 mistakes. Okay. So this was a scenario. This is the first student. I want you to take a moment and understand that how the mistakes were made. 4 mistakes in the first quarter, 1 in the second one, no mistakes in the third one, and 3 mistakes in the last one. All right. So this is the pattern in which the student made errors. Let us now move to another student. Okay. So this is the ESR snapshot of another student. It's the snapshot of the verbal section of another student. Now I want you to tell me, look at the ESR, take your time and tell me, make a guess if you have to, what could be the verbal score of this student. Okay. And remember, there are 8 questions in the first set, 7 in the second, 7 in the second, 7 in the third, and 8 in the last one. Okay. Tell me in the chat pod, what do you think is the verbal score? I know I'm asking you to make a guess, a calculated guess, but what do you think is the GMAT verbal score of the student? Okay. Okay, I have a response. Marco guesses it to be 36. Okay, nice guess, Marco. You are close, I would say. Let's wait for a few more people. Sigda says 40. Okay, that's good. Snigdha, I'll reveal the final but do calculate the number of mistakes that this student has done. Okay, please do calculate that, and please tell me what do you think is the verbal score of the student. Arpit says it is 39. Good guess, Arpit. You guys are getting close actually. Ollie says 37. So I have 36, I have 37, I have 39, I am 40. No. Okay, Pranay says it's 41. I have an interesting response from Gurinder. Gurinder says it's same. So it is probably V30 is what Gurinder is indicating. Okay. And honestly speaking, guys, I do not take away anything from you. Had I been new to the GMAT and I would have looked the 2 ESR reports, I would have probably said, yeah, I think it is going to be somewhere around 32 to 35 because it seems similar, right? There's hardly much of a difference between the two. But let me reveal the score of the student. Okay, this student got a 41 in verbal. Okay, and what's surprising is if you look at the number of mistakes, this student also made 7 mistakes. The earlier one made 8 mistakes. This student has made 7 mistakes, but look at the difference in the verbal score. It's a overwhelming 11 points. And let me put these two side by side for you. Okay, see the ESRs side by side of these two students. One has made 7 mistakes and another has made 8 mistakes. And that's the difference in their scores. And when I convert that into percentile, the difference becomes even more starker. 58 percentile and 93 percentile. Do you know how much does this impact on your overall GMAT score? It can actually create a difference of 60 to 70 points on your overall GMAT score. That is how huge this difference is. And I'm talking about just one more mistake. Okay. Now tell me one thing, guys, and please be open and honest with me. Do you think that GMAT is unfair in the way it scores you? Please tell me. You have a use case in front of you. I'm talking about 2 students. One has got 8 mistakes and another one has 7 mistakes. And you see the difference in percentiles, man. It's overwhelming, around 35%. 35 percentile, almost 60 to 70 points. Okay, and if you're not able to understand the impact that 60 to 70 points bring, it's about getting into a top B school without a scholarship and getting into a top B school with a scholarship, which could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, and just because you made one extra mistake. Okay, so I have good number of responses. Okay, I'll wait for a few more. Please tell me if you think GMAT is unfair, and please be honest. I don't want you to just mention something because you respect GMAT. So please tell me if you think GMAT is unfair. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the responses with you. So I see 45% of you believe that it's a 50-50 split mostly. Half of you believe it is unfair. Half of you believe it is not unfair. It is actually fair to score people like this. And let me tell you, it's GMAT actually is one of the most intelligent assessments in the whole world of your managerial skills. So it's one of the best tests to go for, and it's not about fairness or unfairness. It's all about how the test works. And once I show you the next slide, you will understand why there is such a big difference between the two students. Okay, so one thing that we need to first understand on this slide is the major difference between the two students is that the first student made 4 mistakes in the first quarter itself. Okay, all of us had heard the first 10 or 15 questions are the most important on the GMAT. And this is a live example of that. The first student made 4 mistakes, 4 big blunders. And my guess is out of this 4, a good number, maybe 2 or 3 were in the first 5 itself. Okay. And this student only made 2 mistakes in the first quarter. And if you look at the overall number of mistakes in the first 2 quarters, the first student made 5. The second student made 4. So that's the only difference which exists. Now let's see what is the impact of this. Okay, so this is the second snapshot of the ESR. This is the second part of the same ESR that I showed you guys. All right, so if you look at the first student, in fact, before I draw any inferences from this, I want you to look at it and draw the inferences and tell me, what do you think? what do you think is the difference between the two? And I would ask all of you to respond, because guys, this is the most important part. If you understand what I'm trying to say here, you will not struggle to chart out the action plan for your own self. You will understand where are you going wrong in the way you are preparing for the GMAT. Okay, so I want you to take a moment and analyze the two charts which are here and tell me what are the inferences that you draw. What is the reason why the student got a low score and the other one got such a high score? And I'll wait for a few minutes for your responses. Okay, so I have a couple of responses. In fact, 4 responses now. So Anjali says it is the difficulty level of questions. Good, Anjali. You have actually hit the bullseye. It's all about the difficulty level of questions. When you start, GMAT considers all of us as similar, but the way you progress, the way you attempt has a lot of impact on the difficulty level of questions that you get. Ollie says it's consistency. Marco says it's more mistakes at the beginning. Yes, that's the reason. Pranay says it's consistency. Arpit also says because of the low accuracy in the initial questions. Good. So it's all about consistency. See, on the GMAT, you need to get a streak of questions right. Okay, when I say a streak, you need to get questions right consecutively. And the longer the streak, the bigger the streak is, the more your score is going to be. And that's what adaptive algorithm actually means. Okay, so you need to make sure that you keep getting questions right. And I'm going to break that down into further stages. So let's understand this chart. So let's look at the first student. Let's look at the second quarter. So if you see, in the second quarter, the difficulty level of the questions that the student got right was slightly between medium and low, towards the medium side. So it's low, easy to medium roughly. Okay, now let's look at the difficulty level of the questions that the second student got right in the second quarter. Okay, this student was getting the medium high questions right. So even if the accuracy numbers look very similar, the whole difference is that the second student was getting more difficult questions right. So in fact, there was a lot of difference in the skill level of the two students. The first student wasn't as skilled as the second student was. Okay, and let me actually bring the comparison over here. Let me bring this line over here. Now see the gap. The first student was just getting the easy medium ones. The second student got the medium high ones right. So that's the skill gap that actually was created just because of the first few questions, just because of that accuracy difference in the first few questions. Okay, but the story doesn't end there. Okay, it is just the beginning of the story. So you have the second student has done well till now, and because of which the GMAT has increased the difficulty level of the next set of questions for him. So in the third quarter, this student got 100% accuracy. He got everything right. And the questions he was getting was way above 700 level. Okay, so that is the best part. He scored a lot of marks over here. Whereas the first student also had 100% accuracy over here. But the difficulty level of questions that he got was low. Okay, and that's the difference. Okay, so this is what actually happens on the GMAT. You need to make sure that you continuously get the questions right and increase the difficulty level of the questions that you're getting. Okay, so this is why there is such a big difference in the percentiles of the two students. Okay, now by the way, the ESR that you see on the right hand side is my personal attempt. This was exactly the way I attempted, and that is why I am able to relate it to it so closely. All right, now if you're thinking that this is the end of the story, 7 or 8 mistakes can make a difference, can only have this much difference from 93 percentile to a 58 percentile. Wait for a minute. I'm going to show you something more. Okay, look at this student's performance. He made 9 mistakes. Okay, he has a verbal score of 21 with 9 mistakes. You know what is a percentile in terms of a verbal 21? it's just 26th percentile. Think about it. 7 mistakes, you're at a 93 percentile. With 9 mistakes, you're at a 26 percentile. Okay? So what is the morale of the story? Why am I showing you this much data? What is the morale of the story? What do you think is that I mean to communicate? I have a question. Amok says, please respond to the question in the chat. In the meantime, I'll just take a question from the chat. Amok says, sir, please tell me V36 in percentile. Amok, it's not on my fingertips, but I think it should be very, very close to 70, in the range of 75 to 80 percentile. I have an interesting question. I'll take that question from Arpit in some time. Shinkla says, focus on the initial questions. Good, Shinkla. So that is one way to look at it. Anjali also says the same. You need to pay more attention in the first section. Mahiti has actually hits the bull's eye. It's about where you make the mistakes. That's a very important factor. Pranay, again, really good message. Accuracy is not the only key. Actually, that's what I want to communicate. Those of you who focus on accuracy are focusing on the wrong thing. I can share snapshots of ESRs. I have ESRs of students who have made 15 mistakes, okay, and still ended up with a 26 or 27 verbal score. I know 26, 27 isn't great, but if you compare with the student who has got 21 with 9 mistakes, it is a blessing actually that you could actually get 26 even after getting 50% questions wrong. Okay, so it's not about accuracy, it's about which questions you are getting right. Okay, so test taking strategy in itself is a very, very big thing, and obviously we can help you understand it a little more. If you want, you can connect with us on our like email ID as well, and we can help you understand and answer any queries that you have about it. But I'll just quickly show you the difficulty level chart of this student as well. So if you see the difficulty level chart of this student was not even getting getting to the medium, easy medium questions. It was more towards the easy ones. Okay, so he was stuck in the easy medium zone and more towards the easy one, I would say. So the key learning that I wanted to talk about is skill rules over accuracy. Okay, and I had an interesting question in the poll. Arpit was asking, what if we reverse first and last data? Arpit, that's a very interesting point. And if you reverse the first and last data of the previous student, the game changes a lot. You are looking at a 36, 37 or more kind of a score. But like for that, we can get into an individual discussion and talk about it. But let's move ahead for the sake of the whole batch. Okay, so skill rules over accuracy. So those of you who believe accuracy is the king, stop thinking about that and start focusing on skill. Now, what I mean by skill is, it is important to know which questions do you get right. Skill is nothing but the ability to get a question of any difficulty level correct. Okay, and let me tell you, you can only know, you can only judge your skill when you're skillful rather, when you are able to answer every question correct, irrespective of what the question is. If you're able to pinpoint and tell, okay, this is the correct answer. I know, come what may, I know this is the correct answer. You have no scope of confusion, you have no iota of doubt while marking the answer. Then you can consider yourself as skillful. Okay, so once you are skilled enough, you don't need to worry about any test taking strategy, anything. You can actually do well on the GMAT, and we'll help you understand how you can be skilled. So I'm going to make it a lot more simplified. So generally, when a student scores less than 550 on the GMAT, what does it signify? It basically means, in very short, that the student gets most of the easy questions correct. Okay, but when it comes to medium questions, he struggles with a good number of medium questions. So he's not able to get even half of the medium questions right. And that is the reason when it comes to the hard questions, he hardly ends up getting hard questions. The number of hard questions he gets is very less. Okay, and he doesn't get any of them correct. So when a student scores less than 550, he is generally, struggling with concepts. Okay, now when I say less than 550, I know some people are in this range just because they are weak in one section. But when I say less than 550, I am talking about your overall I'm talking about one section itself. I'm talking about the skill level. So if you're at a skill level of less than 550, you are generally not doing well with medium and hard questions. Okay, you're struggling with concepts. That's the prime area of concern that you have. Okay, so I have a comment from Pranay. Pranay says, I have seen many webinars. The algorithm never got this much clear. Thank you, Pranay, for the comment, and I'm glad to see that I was able to help you out understanding the web, the test taking algorithm. So let's move further and see what is the score range 550 to 650. What does this score range signify? So the difference in this score range is the student who is in this score range generally gets most of the easy ones right. So the accuracy for easy questions is around 80 to 90%. So if he gets some easy questions in the beginning, he will get it right. When it comes to medium questions, he gets most of them right. When I say most, I mean around 60 to 70%, depending on which side of 600 you are. And because he gets most of the medium ones right, he does end up getting a sizable chunk of hard questions. But the problem is, when he gets hard questions, he gets most of them wrong. Okay, and that's where the problem starts for a student who is in this bracket of 550 to 650. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of you who are attending this webinar are in this bracket. So don't worry, we are going to tell you what are the remedies for it. We definitely will focus on that. But what I want you to understand right now is, for you, the problem is not the easy questions. There is a little bit of scope of improvement in the medium ones, but for you, the problem is the hard questions. This is where you need to focus and pay more attention to. Okay, and again, I don't mean to say that just solving hard questions, practicing more hard questions is going to help you. I'll talk about the method and the way forward. The thing you need to focus on is application. Okay, you are probably there because you are struggling with application of concepts. So very quickly, let me compare the two categories, below 550 and 550 to 650. The problem with the first category is you do not get hard questions at all. The problem with the second category is you struggle to get the hard questions right. Okay, so all in all, if you want to ace the GMAT, you have to just do two things. First thing is to make the algorithm serve you hard questions. That's the first thing you need to do. And once you do that, you need to get the hard questions right. Okay, so these are the two things that you need to do to get a 700 plus on GMAT. Now, how do you make the algorithm serve hard questions? You need to have a high accuracy on easy and medium questions of every topic that is tested on the GMAT. And this is very, very important, guys. If you want the algorithm to give you hard questions, it is very important that you do not leave out any topic at all. Okay, that is something which I want all of you to focus on, because this is a very common problem I see students struggling with. They come to me and say, sir, I find permutation combination very difficult. Can I leave it? Okay, some people tell me, okay, boldface is something I don't understand at all in CR. Can I just skip it? Some people have problem with main point questions. They don't want to do main point questions. But guys, what you need to understand is you don't know which question is going to come in the first 15 questions that you're going to face, right? You don't know which topic you're going to be tested on. It's not in your control. The thing that is in your control is to at least make sure that you are able to get easy and medium questions right from any topic whatsoever. And trust me, to get easy and medium questions right, you just need a basic conceptual understanding and even a basic understanding of how to apply them. So with very minimal effort, you can actually improve your capability to a level where you can get all the easy and medium ones right. Okay, so that's the first thing that you need to do. The second thing, which is how to get the hard questions right. Now, in order to get the hard questions right, you need to learn the right skills and you need to learn how to apply them. Okay, so by solving more questions or just by doing more mocks, you are not going to develop that skill. The only way you are going to develop that skill is by actually learning the right skills. So if I quickly show you what does the score of 700 plus signify, it basically means you're getting the easy ones right, you're getting the medium ones right, and you're getting most of the hard ones as well. Now, obviously, the more hard questions you get right, the higher your score goes and reaches towards 750 or something. But this is generally how it looks. Okay. Now, how, like, why do I say solving questions is not enough? Because, see, understand this point. When you're only practicing questions in a mock test, okay, what you are doing is you are basically repeating the same mistakes again and again. See, there is a reason why you are stuck at a level of 550 to 650 or maybe below that. There is a reason. There are certain conceptual gaps that exist, or maybe the application or skill gaps that exist. Now, imagine if you just start practicing more questions, you're going to repeat the same mistakes. Okay. If you don't know how to swim and you jump in the pool, you're not going to magically learn how to swim. And even if you do, it is not going to be the most effective way to learn swimming. The better way is you sit with a coach. He tells you what are the various steps to go about learning swimming. He'll probably do some exercises with you to first help you understand how to float, how to breathe, how to move your hands and legs in the right way. And then only you're going to learn swimming. And if you go to a coach and learn it that way, you're going to learn it much faster and much more effective way as well. Same thing applies over here. Acing GMAT is just like building a new skill. Okay. So when you are solving questions and you're doing some mistakes, you need to first fix the mistakes. And then you need to solve more questions. So do not go about just randomly practicing questions. And let me quote our student who was able to score, improve her score by 130 points in just 30-40 days. She told me one thing, that before I interacted with you, I had this idea of solving as many questions as I should. Okay, so I solved everything in OG. She probably even referred to GMAT and solved a lot of their questions, but she was still stuck. And after I discussed with you, what I realized was it is not about solving questions. It is more about learning from each question. So it's more about quality than quantity. So what you need to do is stop solving more questions. First thing that you need to do right away is you need to build the right skills. If you build the right skills and then you start practicing questions, you are going on the path of success. You're going closer to the success. Okay. So that is the right approach to follow. Now, what do I mean by skills? What I mean by skills is very simple. You are skillful when you know the concept and you know how to apply the concept as well. So concept plus application is what I term as skill. And most of us focus on the concept. We do not focus so much so on the application of the concepts. And I'm sure a lot of us do not really understand what is application. What do I mean by application? So let us understand what do I mean by application, or how do you go about building skills. So I'm now moving to the part where I'm going to focus more on what you should do. Okay. So let me take an example. Let me take the example of critical reasoning. Okay. So in critical reasoning, if you want to solve questions, the first thing that you need to understand is the concepts. What are the concepts? Probably understanding what is a premise, what is a conclusion, what is the argument. All these are basically concepts. But then you have to basically identify a right method to solve pre-thinking, solve CR questions. And a lot of us would have heard about pre-thinking. Okay, pre-thinking in fact is considered the most efficient way to solve a CR question. And I also used to struggle with CR before I started pre-thinking. So the pre-thinking process is simple. It involves 3 steps. The first step is understanding the argument, and very importantly, the scope of the conclusion. Okay, focus on the word scope. The second step is, once you have understood the argument and the conclusion, you need to identify the gaps that exist between the argument and the conclusion, and that is what is known as pre-thinking. You need to pre-think your answer. And once you have done that, step 3, which is eliminating incorrect choices, becomes very, very easy. In fact, I always recommend that you should spend around 50 to 60% of your time on step 1, roughly 20% of your time on pre-thinking, and then you will only need to spend 20% of your time on eliminating incorrect choices. And let me tell you, most of the people do it the other way around. They spend very little time on understanding the argument, maybe just 30% of the time. They do not rethink and just move to the third step, which is eliminating incorrect choices. And in the end, they're stuck with two choices. Okay. So I have a question in the pod. When someone is asking how to apply pre-thinking, don't worry, Soma, I'm going to come to that as well. Okay. And let me rather ask all of you, like, let me ask this question. It's a really interesting question. So tell me, how do you solve CR questions today? There's a poll over there on your screen. So please participate in this poll. I'll wait for a minute for some responses to come. So tell me, how do you go about solving CR questions today? All right, so I have some responses. I'll wait for maybe 10 seconds more. And I request everyone to respond to this, because that way I'll understand what is the depth that I need to go through, because I'm going to help you learn pre-thinking for sure. Obviously, I can't do it in one session, but I'll give you a glimpse of it and the right approach. But I want to see the the current method that most of you follow. Okay. Okay, so let me end the poll now. I have a good number of responses. So I see that most of you wish to pre-think and they're not able to pre-think in most of the cases. That is good. At least I see that the thing of the job is done. Trust me, it's not that difficult to learn pre-thinking than it is to trust pre-thinking. Because I see a lot of people, 20% of you, saying that I believe pre-thinking takes a lot of time, so I go ahead to option choices directly. And let me be very open and honest with you. When I was preparing for GMAT as a student, I hated pre-thinking. Okay. And I'm very open with you, very honest with you. I hated pre-thinking. And the only reason I hated pre-thinking was I'm lazy. Okay. I don't like to pre-think. Who do I used to feel that who in this world with a sane mind would like to pre-think the answer? There are 5 choices written in front of you. Just go through them and pick the right answer. And that's how I used to think as a student. I spent a lot of time going through all the concepts, solving questions, only to realize that I'm getting random questions right, randomly I'm getting them right, randomly I'm getting them wrong. In fact, there was an interesting pattern I noted, and which actually turned my thought process into towards more favor towards pre-thinking. What I could see was, and this usually happened in the hard questions, that if the correct answer is A or B, my chance of getting it right increases substantially. But if the correct answer is D or E, I'm almost getting everything wrong. Okay. So I started thinking, why could this be happening? And the only reason that came to my mind was, I'm getting biased by what I'm reading first. And that is when I realized that if I keep doing the same thing again and again, I'm never going to improve my CR skills. And that is when I understood the importance of pre-thinking. What happens in pre-thinking is, even before you're reaching the answer choices, you kind of know what is the right thing that you're looking for. And the moment you see that right thing, you're able to pick it up. So the question is not biasing you at all. Okay, someone is saying the audio is off, which is bad. So I'll ask this question to everyone to understand whether the audio is working or not. Please respond to this poll if you're not able to hear me. Okay, Please respond to this poll if you're not able to hear me, and I'll wait for some more responses. Okay, good. So I see that almost everyone can hear me, so it seems to be a local issue at your end. So please try rejoining if you can. Okay, so I'll continue. So that is when I realized that pre-thinking is the way forward, and I started pre-thinking, and that changed a lot of things for me. In fact, when I took the GMAT, I scored a 88 percentile on CR. It may not be great, but it is still it was still decent. It did the job for me. Okay, so let me tell you how you can pre-think, and especially to those of you who are facing problems with pre-thinking, there are basically two ways to go about it. There are some general arguments where you need to just rely on the gaps between the argument and the conclusion. See, pre-thinking is always dependent on identifying the logical gaps between the argument and the conclusion. If you're able to do that, you will be able to pre-think. But in some cases, there are certain common form of arguments that are tested on GMAT. Okay, and this is something which we have identified from our research. The first form is plan and goal kind of arguments. The second is comparison kind of arguments. The third one is causality. And the fourth one are quant-based arguments. Okay, I'm not going to get deeper into each of them because we are going to have a separate session on CR where we are going to talk about some of these arguments, multiple arguments in fact, and tell you how to rethink in all cases. But I'll just touch base on the causality based argument, which is the most common type of argument tested on CR. So what is a typical causal argument? A typical causal argument is one where you have a cause and effect relationship being portrayed in the conclusion. So let's say the cause is X and let's say the effect is Y. Okay, then that is particular something what we call as a causal argument. So the argument is all about establishing that X causes Y. Okay, so over here also you can pre-think by identifying the logical gaps between the premise and the conclusion. But at the same time, there are certain guidelines which can be used. And again, mark my words, I'm not saying that you should be dependent on the guidelines. The guidelines are just to help you think in the right direction. So it's kind of a pre-thinker's guide which helps you get into the right direction if you're not able to identify the logical gaps. Now, whenever you see a causal argument, there are three guidelines that you can follow. So the argument assumes three basic stuff. First thing is, it always assumes that X should have happened before Y. That is a valid assumption. Okay, so if you face a strengthener question, let's say, on a causal argument, and there is a choice which establishes that X happened before Y, it is strengthening the conclusion. Okay, and before I discuss any further, I would like to know if you are clear with this idea. Because if you're not clear with it, I'll elaborate. So let's say our argument is X causes Y. Okay, then the assumption that the author has considered is X happened before Y. So if you see a strengthener, a question which is based on strengthening the argument, you can pre-think that any choice that tells me that X happened before Y can strengthen the argument. Similarly, if it's a weakened question, and you know that X did not happen before Y, it happened after Y, then it weakens the argument. It kind of breaks the argument. Okay, so this is what I mean by the pre-thinker's guide, like the guidelines to think. So I see that most of you are clear, and I will move forward because agenda right now in the webinar is not to teach you pre-thinking. I'm just giving an overview. If you want to learn pre-thinking, we will be organizing a CR session maybe in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, so you can attend that. The other guideline that you can follow in a causal argument is that there is no alternate cause. If an argument says X causes Y, there is an inherent assumption that nothing else could have caused Y. And the last guideline is there is no reverse causality that exists. What does that mean? It means that Y does not cause X. Okay, so these are three guidelines that you can keep in mind. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you internalize these guidelines with the help of a question. Okay, so here is a question on your screen, and I want you to take your time, maybe take 4-5 minutes if needed, and solve this question, and then we will discuss the solution using the pre-thinkers guideline. Okay, so work on this question. I'm going to get your poll in the meanwhile. So I'm going to get your poll, start working on it, and I'm going to mute myself for 3 to 4 minutes, and then I'll give you a 30-second warning before I end the poll. So all the best, the poll will be up soon. All right, last 30 seconds before I end the poll. Okay, so I see a good number of responses. And I'm ending the poll now. All right, so how was this question, guys? Can you put your comments in the chat so that I know how did you find this question? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it just medium difficulty question? How did you find this one overall? Okay, and wait for some responses, guys. How did you find this question overall? Okay, I see everyone is shy to share their responses. Did all of you find it tough? Okay, Arpit says it was medium. Sachin found it good. Mahiti also found it medium difficulty level. Okay. Okay. Nice. Okay, so let's start understanding this question. So what we will do is we'll follow the 3-step process that I talked about. What we are going to do is we are going to first analyze the stem, because that will help us understand what is the argument all about and the scope of the argument. Once we do that, it becomes much more easier for us to solve the question. So let's read this argument. In a study to understand, so there is a study that was conducted, and probably the aim of the study was to understand something. Let's read what was it supposed to be aimed at. So in a study to understand the impact of taking online tuitions on the academic score of high school students. So I'm talking about the impact of taking online tuitions on the academic scores. Okay, the study was aimed to understand the impact. So till now, I know that this argument describes a study, and its aim. The aim is to find out the effect of taking online tuitions on the academic score of high school students. Let's read further. Researchers followed the scores of a group of students who had never taken such tuitions but were counseled to do so. So this is an important piece of information. So the process that was followed was that the researchers studied people who did not take online tuitions before. So there was no bias as such over there with respect to people taking tuitions earlier or not. So they had not taken online tuitions, and researchers basically studied them, and these students were counseled to do so. Okay, let's read further. Those who took up tuitions within a fortnight of the study or start of the study, so those people, I'm talking about some students who took up tuitions within the first 15 days of the start of the study, were thrice as likely to get much lower scores at the end of the study than those who did not take up the tuition. So now I'm basically talking about the result. The result of the whole study is that students who started taking tuitions, so I'm comparing two kind of people, who started taking tuitions versus those who did not take up tuitions. So students who started taking online tuitions, their chances of getting a much lower score tripled. Okay, so in a way, the argument tries to convey that the impact of taking online tuitions is very, very negative. Let's read further. Since online tuitions make the students dependent on them, perhaps thereby making them inattentive in class. Now, it's very important to focus on this aspect. So, first, the author talks about a fact. He tells us that online tuitions make students dependent on them. Okay, but then he presents an opinion. The opinion is perhaps, and it is evident from the word perhaps thereby making them inattentive in class. So since they are dependent on the online tuitions, they are becoming more inattentive in the class. They are not paying enough attention in the class. It is likely that the online tuitions led to a lower score in high school students. So this is the conclusion. The conclusion is that the online tuitions caused high school students to get lower scores. Okay, now if you focus on the cause and effect part, if this is basically a cause and effect relationship, it is trying to establish a cause and an effect. The effect is that students are getting a low score, and the cause that is considered in this case is they are taking online tuition. So you can clearly see the cause is taking online tuitions, and the effect is a lower score. Okay, so now that we know what is the argument all about, and we have clearly identified the cause and effect, let's go with the first guideline. Now, this is a strengthener question, so I need to look at arguments which can strengthen the conclusion. So first guideline tells me that if something tells us that X happened before Y, then it will be a strengthener. So for example, one strengthener could be any statement, and you don't need to worry about the exact statement, but any statement that establishes that students who took online tuitions were previously not scoring as low. Okay, so this is basically before the study, they were not scoring as low as they are scoring at the end of the study. So anything that establishes that before the online tuitions, they were not scoring as low can be a strengthener for me. Okay, so this is the first guideline. So if you focus on the first guideline, you will be able to think about the strengthener. What about the second guideline? The second guideline says that there should be no alternate cause, or in simple terms, X led to Y. Okay, so in this case, any statement that indicates that nothing else could have led to the high scores in the high school students will be a strengthener. Okay, so we can look for something that establishes a link makes the link very clear between the two things. The cause and the effect will be considered a strengthener. So let's understand the argument in depth once again. So what the argument said was online tuitions led to inattentiveness, and then the passage hints at the idea that inattentiveness probably caused the low scores. So if you look at the linkage, the cause and effect relationship, it flows like this. Online tuitions leads to inattentiveness, which leads to lower scores. Okay, so if there is a statement which even tells me that inattentiveness was the inattentiveness is an important factor, or something which tells me that if students are more inattentive because of online tuitions, and like inattentiveness is a very important factor which is judged in the test, can also be a strengthener. So anything that makes X as a more viable option, the cause as a more viable option. So any statement that supports the idea of inattentiveness in class can lead to a lower score is also can be a strengthener. So that is what I understand from the second guideline. Okay, let's look at the third guideline. The third guideline says there should be no reverse causality. What does it mean? That Y shouldn't have caused X. Okay, so if we get to know somehow that Y cannot cause X, then also it is going to be a strengthener. Okay, for example, if we get to know that low scores did not lead the students to take up online tuition. For example, if we know that it was not because students were scoring low, that's why they actually took up online tuitions. If we get to know this as well, somehow it will be considered as a strengthener. Okay, so these are the three things that we can think of if we use the pre-thinking guidelines. Okay, so see how easy it is to pre-think some assumptions or pre-think the answer if you follow the guidelines. And these guidelines are applicable for the 4 type of arguments that we talked about. So now what we'll do is, now that we know that there are 3 things that could be the answer, we can actually go to each choice and eliminate them one by one. So let's look at this choice. And this was one of the popular choices. A lot of you actually marked choice A as the correct answer. But there's a slight twist to this one. Let me tell you what. So let's read this choice. Students who took up tuitions were no more intelligent than those who did not take up the tuitions. Okay, so there is one small problem with this choice. The first thing is, we cannot assume a correlation between intelligence and scores. Okay, so this intelligence can be any kind of intelligence, and it is not mentioned that intelligent students score high. So that's an outside knowledge we are not supposed to assume in this case. Okay, and I know some of you can debate on that, but there is another problem with this choice. That's not the only issue. The other issue with this choice is, even if we assume that more students are more intelligent, are likely to score higher, this choice is still vaguely worded. And let me tell you what I mean to say. What is the meaning of no more intelligent? Okay, no more intelligent can mean 2 things. One, that students who took up tuitions had same level of intelligence as the students who did not take up tuitions. Okay, so if they had same level of intelligence, then the lack of intelligence cannot be blamed for lower scores, and it supports the conclusion. So if they have the same level of intelligence, then it kind of supports the argument. But there is another meaning of no more intelligent. The other meaning of no more intelligence is they could be less intelligent. It could also mean that students who took up tuitions, online tuitions, were less intelligent than the ones who did not take up those tuitions. Now, if that is the case, then it kind of means that Y happened before X. So it was Y that led to X, not X that led to Y. It was because students were not intelligent, they actually went ahead and took the tuitions. So in that case, it actually ends up being a weakener. So there is an ambiguity in the impact that this choice creates. And that is why it is not the right answer. Okay, and I agree to this. This is a very tough choice to eliminate. It was not that easy, but if you focus on the right words, if you focus on the right aspects, you will understand that from your pre-thinking, one of the choices clearly, one of the guidelines clearly told you that if anything tells you that low scores led to people taking more online classes, then that is going to be a weakener. Okay, which is happening in this case because of the ambiguity that exists in the meaning. Okay, now let's look at choice B. Choice B also is one of the popular choice. Some of you actually mark that choice, and it is something which comes to very close of being the right answer if we change a few words. But let's understand this. Students who already had low scores when the study started were as inclined to take up online tuitions at the end of the study as the students who had high scores. Okay, So this is this is close to the strengthener, but it is not a strengthener, and I'll tell you why. It is a little tricky in that way. What it tells is, let's assume, for example, that students who had low scores at the start of study are denoted by A, and students who had high scores at the start of study are denoted by B. Okay. Now, in this case, if it was mentioned that A was as likely to take up tuitions as B, at the start of the study, it could have been a strengthener, because then it takes the scores before the start of the study out of picture. It makes both of them at the same place. Okay. But in this sentence, in this option, it is mentioned that they have equal inclination to take up online tuitions by the time the study ended. And that's where the problem lies. Okay. That is why this cannot be a strengthener, because it talks about the time, the inclination when the study had ended, and not about the inclination before the study. Okay. If we change a few words here, and if instead of the time period end of study, we talk about start of study, this could very well become the strengthener. All right. So that is why choice B is incorrect. Let's move to choice C now. In fact, just give me a moment, guys. I need some water. So just give me a moment. All right. So let's look at choice C and understand why it is incorrect. Very few of you actually marked this as the correct answer, but let's still go through it. Although many students stop the tuitions halfway through the study, okay, so even though some of the students actually ended the tuition halfway through the study, they were not able to increase their average scores. Okay, so if you focus, this actually weakens the causality. Okay, it tells that even after stopping the tuitions, the scores did not improve. So probably the causality, the cause, the relation between tuitions and scores is not that high. That is what this choice establishes, and that is why this is incorrect. Let's quickly look at choice D. What is the problem with choice D? So let's read this choice. The study did not take into account the student's inclination towards non-academic activities. So this is one of the easiest choice to eliminate. It just talks about non-academic activities which are irrelevant to the conclusion, and it hints at a weakener, but since it is not about non-academic activities, and that is what we are not tracking in the study, it is not going to impact the conclusion in any way. So D is also incorrect. That leaves us with E. But if you focused on pre-thinking, you would have easily picked E as the correct answer, because this was one of the results of the guidelines. Let's read this. Most of the questions in the school assignments are based on the class lectures and student-teacher interaction rather than on school textbook. So basically what this guideline is, this statement, is in line with our strengthener 3. Okay, it is in line with that particular thing. It tells us that high score depends on the students paying more attention in the class. Okay, so if high score depends on students paying more attention in the class, then if they do not pay attention, the scores are bound to be low. And we know as a fact that online tuitions make students dependent on them and make them inattentive. So if online tuitions make students inattentive and attention in the class is an important factor to score high, it's obvious that inattentiveness will lead to low scores. Okay, so this choice indeed is basically strengthening the argument. All right, now there's a very interesting question. Pratt has asked, what is the difficulty level of this question? So I would say the difficulty level of this question is medium high. What it means is it is somewhere around that 700 mark, just because of the closeness of the answer choices. But if you focus on pre-thinking, if you follow the guidelines really well, it is very, very easy for you to mark E as the correct answer, because this is one of the strengtheners that we identified in our pre-thinking. Okay, so Som has asked repeat once more. So I'm not sure, Som, if you are focused, if you want me to repeat just choice E. I'm going to repeat choice E anyway. Let me do that. So what I mean to say is, in this choice, the author is saying most of the questions in the school assignments are based on the class lectures and student-teacher interactions. So what it means is that if a student is not paying attention in the class and is being inattentive, it will lead to a low score automatically. Okay, and that is why this choice strengthens the argument, because we know that online tuitions make students inattentive and it will definitely then lead to low scores. Okay, Som has an interesting point of view. He says, does not seem like a GMAT like question. Okay, I don't have a reference questions with me right now, but every question that we talk about in our course or we discuss is actually based on a real GMAT question. So that is something that we ensure while creating question. We do our research really well and make sure any question that we teach you is going to be based on a GMAT style question. So it's not a copy. What we see is what is the core idea that is being tested there, and we try to create a different scenario, a different thought process on the same idea. Okay, so that is something you can rely on. So this is definitely a GMAT like question. Okay, Pratt has an interesting question. Is there any kind of CR question where we cannot apply pre-thinking? Honestly, Pratt, there is no GMAT question where you can't apply pre-thinking, simply because pre-thinking is nothing but identifying the logical gap that is there between a premise and a conclusion. And if there are no logical gaps, probably the question won't even exist. So it is definitely possible to pre-think. Obviously, when you are new to the idea of pre-thinking, you will take some time to learn it. And that's true for any new skill that you learn. Even if when you learn driving for the first time or swimming for the first time, it takes time to do that. So just focus on the right approach, and these guidelines are going to help you. But I'm not saying that you need to be completely rely on them. In some cases, you may even get to the pre-thought assumption without even using the guidelines. Okay, and that will happen in a lot of cases as well. But what you need to focus on is the logical gap that exists, and critically reason with the argument and the conclusion yourself. So think before you look at the answer choices. That is definitely going to help you. All right. So I took a stab at teaching what is the idea of rethinking by taking an example. But by no means that's the objective of this session. This is just to help you understand what I mean by application of concepts. So just knowing the concepts is not enough. It is important how you approach each problem. So what we believe is there are certain methods that you need to follow to ace each section. For example, in sentence correction, you need to focus on the meaning-driven approach. You need to focus on the meaning first. In CR, it is important to pre-think. In RC, it is important to follow involved and evolved reading. In data sufficiency, it is important to draw the right inferences. And in PS, you need to follow a 3-step process. Okay. Now, I talked about pre-thinking a little bit, but we are going to organize webinars for each of these topics. In fact, last week we organized a webinar for DS and PS. Before that, we organized a webinar on reading comprehension. The next week, we are going to have a webinar on SC. So you will get an invite in your email IDs for that very soon, maybe by Monday or Tuesday. So just keep checking your email accounts. You will be getting an invite, and we will also conduct webinars on CR, where we are going to talk about the process at length. Okay. So the idea is you need to learn the right method to solve the questions. Now, with that in mind, let us now build an action plan. So we have understood what we need to do. Okay. But let's put that plan, put that thought into action. How can we create a proper plan and go about doing it? So the first thing that you need to do is focus on one section at a time. Do not worry about both the sections at once. Okay. Focus on one section at a time. And if you are a retaker, what I mean by a retaker is someone who has already taken the GMAT or someone who has been preparing for quite some time now. So if you're a retaker and you are about to take the GMAT like really soon, you should work on your weak section first, and then you should go to the strong section. However, if you are freshly into GMAT preparation and you have already started working on a section, you can continue working on that. Okay, but the key idea is you need to focus on one section at a time. Do not focus on multiple sections. Now, I'll take up verbal first. I'll talk about both the sections. I'll talk about verbal as well as quant, but I'll start with verbal and then I'll move to quant. Now, what you need to do in order to improve your verbal score is you need to first create a benchmark of 70 percentile and divide the three sections of verbal, which are SC, CR, and RC, into two groups. Okay. If you score less than 70 percentile, keep that particular module in group 1. Okay. If you score more than 70 percentile on a particular module, keep that one in group 2. And why are we grouping them into two parts? Because there are different strategies that you need to follow for each of them. Okay. Now, in case you don't know how to identify the basically percentiles in each module, you can probably come on our platform, which is www.gmatviz.com, and take up a free quiz. We give you at least one or two free quizzes in each of the modules. So you can take up a free quiz, register for a free trial, and once you get the score, we always give you a skill score as the output, which is very, very similar to the percentile. Okay, and our estimate has been very, very similar to what students have got in their actual GMAT. So you can rely on it, and that way you can divide the modules into two groups. Now, once you have divided them into two groups, then you can work on them accordingly. So let me take you through an example. Okay, so let's say a student has 80% in SC, 30% in CR, and 50% in RC. So obviously, SC will go in group 2, whereas the rest of the two sections will go in group 1. Okay, so in which order should he study? So he should study the group 1 modules first. So his first priority should be CR, the second priority should be RC, and the third priority should be SC, because in SC he is decently good. Okay, so this is how you should approach verbal. Okay, so two simple steps: divide it into two groups and then give priority to group 1 first and then to group 2. Okay, so are the instructions clear till this point? A quick yes, no. I am going to start a poll. So are the instructions clear till this point? Quick yes, no, guys. Okay, I have some responses. Good to see that almost everyone is clear with it. Good. So let's move forward then. Let's see what you should do next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with group 2, which is basically the groups where you have more than 70%. So in group 2, all you need to do is you need to learn the right approach and master it. Okay, so I have already talked about the approach for CR. I've taken you through an example. In SC, we follow a meaning driven approach. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but first thing that you need to do is learn the approach. Now, how do you learn the approach? The most easiest way to learn the approach is basically go through a resource which uses the approach end to end. So one good thing about our course is that we make sure that everywhere we are using the same methodology, and in fact we do not start our course with concepts. We start our course with some basic concepts, but focus is more on teaching the approach. So even if you go forward and take our free trial, you will see a good number of lessons which are focused on teaching you the approach. At least in CR and RC, you will see a good number of lessons. Obviously, we haven't given you access to the complete course in the free trial. There is only access to 10% of it. So, but it will still give you some idea. If you like it, you can obviously subscribe to our complete package. There you will get the end-to-end thing. Okay. So the first thing is you need to understand and learn the approach. Once you learn the approach, you need to solve 15 questions, maybe one at a time, and focus on the word one at a time, because that's very important. You need to take up one question at a time and solve them and look at what are the deviations from the explanation. Okay, so learning a method is going to take you some time, that is for sure. The best way to do that is take up a question, solve it, and right away look at the explanation. Because if you look at it right away, then the method that you followed is very fresh in your mind. So if you look at the solution right away and read it properly or go through it properly, you will be able to identify the deviations from the solution. So for you, it is going to be much more easier to learn the method. Okay. And that's why I'm saying do it one at a time. Do not do all 15 at once or 5 at once and then look at the solutions, because then you will forget a lot of things. And the other benefit is, if you do it one at a time, you learn from each question and you apply that learning on another question. So this is the best way to actually learn the right approach. And let me tell you, if you are thinking of practicing questions, again, I know I have told it multiple times in the session, do not go about practicing questions right away. Step 1 is the most important. Learn the method and practice questions using the method. Okay. Now, a challenge that students face while doing this, and this is something which I just talked about a little bit, but let me ask you this question in a poll over here. Let me bring the poll. That do you know a resource which provides the solution in a methodical way? When I say methodical way, I mean the methods that I talked about. And when I say, do you know a source which provides the solution in a methodical way, I mean to say that which provides every single solution using the methodical way. Every single solution. I know I have heard from a lot of students, I refer to OG, the questions are great, no doubt, but the explanations nowhere close to good. I don't understand most of it. And that is a problem. In fact, a lot of you have responded to the poll, and I see that everyone says that no, I do not know a resource that provides a solution in the methodical way. This is a big problem. People do not focus on a lot on teaching you the methods and giving you the solution in the same way. But at GMAT Viz, it is one of our biggest priorities. We make sure that every single solution follows the methodical approach, every single one of it. And the reason why we are able to do so is we spend twice the time, and mark my words, we spend twice the time on writing the solutions than creating questions. We take utmost effort to make sure that we are learning something, you are able to inculcate it and use it in every single question. Okay, so if you are really looking forward to learning the methodical approach for solving questions, if you are really looking forward to improving your accuracy, you should definitely look at the GMAT Viz course. Okay, it is the most effective course out there which can help you do so. Okay, and that is where the idea of concept booster came into our mind. We make sure that we dedicate a file to help you learn application. So what happens is, when as soon as you learn a concept, we right away have a concept booster where we give you one question at a time. So what you do is you attempt a question, you solve it, and right away you look at the explanation of the question. So it's a quiz in a way, but it's not a typical quiz where you're solving multiple questions. The objective of the quiz is to help you learn. So you solve a question, you analyze the solution, and then you go to the next question. The idea is you're able to figure out the gaps in application. And the best part that we do in the concept booster is each question is handpicked and we cover a different aspect in each question. So let's say, for example, in a certain topic, there are 5 different aspects that are tested on the GMAT. We have created 5 different things for the 5 different questions for this particular topic. Okay, so that is what we do. Now, how do you master application? So it's very simple. You first learn application of concepts. So when I say application of concepts, I mean the 3-step method which I talked about. You learn the method, you solve 15 questions one at a time and learn from each question. That way you have mastered the understanding. Then you need to practice 30 to 40 questions more using the approach. That way you will be able to internalize the process and reduce the time. Because when you are learning the method, when you're in the first stage, and let me go back to the slide, when you're basically at this particular stage where you're practicing 15 questions one at a time, you should not time yourself at all. Okay, you should just focus on learning the methods. You should not time yourself at all. If you do that, you will be able to learn the method. Now, when you come to this stage where you are practicing 40 questions using the approach, At this stage, you will start seeing an improvement in time taken per question. And in the end, you will be able to solve questions in the right amount of time, which is there. And remember, even for these 30 to 40 questions, you should review the solutions at depth. You may not need to do it one at a time. You can do it 4 to 5 questions or even 10 questions at a time, but the approach remains similar. Okay. Now, I have a question in the Q&A pod. Someone is asking, Som is asking how long is the course. So the course depends on like how long is the course is an answer. The answer to the question depends on what your current skill level is. The good thing is our course is completely artificial intelligence driven. So the moment you come online and share your scores, the course will automatically identify what is the right amount of time for you to improve and reach your target score, and it will tell you that. Okay. And if you want to consult further, you can obviously get in touch with us. We will help you understand that. But I'm going to give you an overall idea as well right away. So what is the time required to improve for group 2? So ideally, you need to spend around 15 to 20 hours per module. So let's say there is one module in this group. For example, SC is in this group. You will probably need to spend 15 to 20 hours working on this particular module. Okay, and the idea is you should be able to increase your overall score and GMAT score. I'll give you an estimate as well. So if you have 2 modules in group 2, you will need somewhere around 30 to 40 hours, and you can look at an improvement of 4 to 5 points. 4 is on the lower side. You can definitely look at an improvement of 5 points as well. And the overall GMAT score can improve by 30 to 40 points on a whole. Okay, so that is something which is there that we do. So overall, we believe that this is the time that you require to improve things in group 2. Now, what about group 1? What about tackling modules in group 1? So if there is a module in group 1, it basically means you are weak with respect to the conceptual knowledge as well. Okay, so that is something you need to work on as well. Now, in order to tackle modules in group 1, you need to first identify the conceptual weaknesses that exist. So you need to take up a sectional test for that module. So for example, if CR is in group 1 for you, you need to take up a sectional test of 15 to 20 questions. You can probably take it on the GMAT platform as well. And then you need to filter the topics in which you have less than 70% accuracy. So in the GMAT portal, we give you a detailed dashboard as well, where you tell you what your accuracy, your not accuracies, we give you your percentile in various various topics, various skills and applications as well. Okay, so we call it mass, which is a skill score in itself and very close to your percentile. So you can then filter topics which have less than 70 percentile, and for these topics you need to revise the concepts to solidify your understanding. Once you revise the concepts, you will be clear with the concepts, and the conceptual gaps will not exist anymore. And then you will need to go through the application as well. You need to learn the methodology for this module as well, because if something is in group 1, you are struggling both with concepts and application. So for any module in group 1, you would probably need to spend somewhere around 30 to 40 hours of effort, and you will probably see a improvement of 4 points in verbal just because of just from one module in group 1. That will have an impact of around 30 points on your GMAT score. Okay, now all of this is dependent on what your current score is and everything, but I'm just giving you an overall idea with respect to time. Okay, now let's talk about improving your quant score, and then we will quickly summarize the whole thing. Now in quant, it is very important for you to identify the concepts in which you are weak. See, the idea in quant is you need to first make sure that you get easy and medium questions right in every single topic that is there. Okay, now in order to do so, you need to identify which topics you are weak at. So what we recommend is you should take up 15 questions each from number properties, algebra, word problems, and geometry. Okay, if you don't know how to find these questions, you can come on GMAT portal. You can create a quiz having 15 questions from each of the sections. Take this one at a time. Okay, do not focus on all of them. Just don't go rush through all of them at once. Take up number properties first probably and start working on it. Okay, so take a quiz and identify the topics with accuracy less than 60%. In topics which you have accuracy less than 60%, it basically means you are struggling with easy and medium questions as well. Okay, in that case, you need to revise the concept for these topics, and then you need to practice at least 10 questions on each of these topics. Okay, so that is how you can work on the quant side of things. Now, if you take up the GMAT Whiz course, then this process becomes even more effective for you. How does it become even more effective for you? Simply because in GMAT Whiz, we have a concept of diagnostic quizzes. So what we do is, when you start learning, going through the quant module, at relevant places in the module, we give you diagnostic quizzes to identify what are your strengths and weaknesses and personalize the course accordingly. So we ask you to learn the concepts only if we identify that as a weakness. Now, why am I suggesting this approach over the previous one that I talked about? There is a small problem with the previous approach where you go module wise, which is number properties, word problems, algebra. Because the problem there is, in quant, a lot of topics are intermixed. For example, if you're learning prime numbers, which is in number properties, you still need to know exponents, the idea of exponents or how to solve equations before that, okay, which is a part of algebra. Okay, and in some cases, you might also need to understand what are percentages and ratios even before you delve into topics of algebra or number properties or geometry. So there is a right uh, sequence in which you should learn concepts. But if you go through the GMAT Whiz course, the order is taken care of. We give you everything in the most optimal order, and we give you diagnostic quizzes. So automatically we identify the topics you are good at and remove those topics from your course. So you don't need to worry about revisiting things that you're already good at. So those concept files will be removed from your course, and we will then focus on just the topics that you are weak on. Okay, and we will take you through the booster lessons. Booster lessons are the same lessons that I was talking about earlier, which are the concept boosters, where we teach you the methodology. And as I was telling you, we make sure that if there are 5 different aspects tested on GMAT, we give you one question at least on all those 5 different aspects. Okay, so what is the time that you will require to improve in quant? Ideally, if you are taking the GMAT Whiz course, a 1 point improvement in your overall quant score will require 8 to 10 hours of effort, which basically means if you are looking at a 3 to 4 point improvement in quant, which is equivalent to 20 to 40 points overall, that is going to take you around 25 to 40 hours. Okay, so let us now summarize the learnings from this session that we have got till now. Okay, let us summarize the learnings very quickly. So to summarize, what you need to do is you need to start working on either verbal or quant. You need to work on just one of the 2 things first. And in verbal, you need to create 2 groups. Group 1, where you have less than 70% skill score. Group 2, in which you have more than 70% skill score. If something is in group 2, you build the right applications, you build the right application skills, you focus on learning the methodology. For things in group 1, you work on concepts selectively and application as well. Okay, so depending on how many modules you have in group 1 and group 2, you might have to work for anywhere between 60 to 80 hours on verbal, and you can see an improvement of up to 8 points on your verbal score easily if you follow this methodology, which will lead to an improvement of approximately 60 points in your GMAT score. Now, for quant, you need to work on your weak concepts. You need to follow the approach that I just talked about, so I'm not getting into the detail of it again. You can probably do so in 25 to 40 hours, and you can easily see a 4-point improvement in your score, which is an overall improvement of 40 points. Okay, obviously the improvement in verbal and quant scores will depend a lot on where you are and what are your weak areas. I'm just taken a general case scenario and talked about it, but this is how you can get a 100-point improvement in as less as 100 to 120 hours of effort, which is definitely possible in 30 days. Okay, so this is how you can improve your score. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask us now. I'm opening the session to the open-ended Q&A, which is the last part. You can register for free trial by going to our website. I'm going to share the link. In fact, I'll ask Shakib to share the link. You can also write to us on support, or you can send a WhatsApp message on the number that is provided on the screen.